I grew up believing that walls could hold memories. Not just in a poetic way, but literally. Every crack in this house, every stain on the wood, every nail driven into these walls. I remember why it's there, who was crying, who was laughing, who was leaving. And maybe that's why, when I found out my own son sold this house behind my back, it didn't feel like losing a property. It felt like someone had ripped pages out of my chest. My name is Evelyn. I'm 68 years old, and for 42 of those years, this house has been the only place that truly felt like mine. I married here. I raised my son here. I watched my husband die here. I buried him without a grave, right outside that kitchen window, where the rosebush leans toward the light like it's trying to get back to him. His ashes are under that soil. When I say this is all I have, I'm not being dramatic. I mean it. The day everything started to fall apart looked painfully ordinary. The kind of morning you don't even remember unless something terrible happens later. The kettle whistled too loud. The floor was cold under my bare feet. I could hear the neighbor's dog barking at nothing, again. I toasted the same dry bread, stirred the same cheap coffee, sat at the same wobbling table. And I waited for a call that never came. It was my son's birthday. Daniel, my only child. I had wrapped his gift the night before, a shirt I knew he would say he didn't need, and a handwritten letter he would probably never finish reading. I put it carefully in a paper bag with his favorite chocolate bar, the same brand I used to sneak into his lunchbox when he was little and we were broke. I kept glancing at the clock on the wall, the one that always runs 5 minutes late, as if time itself were afraid to move forward in this house. By 11, I told myself he was just busy. Meetings, deadlines, important adult things. By noon, I started polishing the kitchen counters for no reason, just to keep my hands from trembling. By 1, I took his shirt out of the bag to fold it again, then put it back, then took it out, like the fabric could tell me if he was coming. I felt ridiculous, like a teenager waiting by the phone. It's funny how silence can be so loud, the ticking clock, the refrigerator humming, my own breathing, heavier than it used to be. I thought about calling him, but I heard his voice in my head, the way it sounded the last time we argued. Mom, I'm not a kid. I have my own life. That sentence still sits in my throat, like a stone. Around 2 in the afternoon, my doorbell rang. For a second, my heart almost burst out of my chest. I wiped my hands on my dress, fixed my hair in the reflection of the microwave, and smiled before I even opened the door. I was already practicing my line. "You're late, birthday boy." But it wasn't Daniel. A man stood there in a gray suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders, holding a thick envelope and a clipboard. He had that tired politeness in his eyes, the kind you see in people who knock on too many doors for a living. For a moment, I thought he was selling something. Insurance, internet, religion. "Mrs. Evelyn Sanders?" he asked. The way he said my name made me straighten my back. "Yes," I answered, gripping the edge of the door. "I have a notice to deliver to you," he said. "You'll need to sign here to confirm you received it." He handed me the clipboard first. My fingers hesitated around the pen. I didn't like the weight of his words. Notice, deliver. It sounded cold, official, dangerous. But I signed anyway. I've spent a lifetime signing things I barely understood, trusting that people wouldn't hurt me on purpose. When he gave me the envelope, I felt the thickness of it, the sharp edge of the paper against my palm. My name was printed on the front in bold letters. There was something humiliating about it. I stepped back into the house, the air suddenly heavier, and the man waited at the door like he wasn't allowed to cross an invisible line. "Do you know what this is?" I asked. He shifted his weight. "Ma'am, I'm just required to deliver it, but you should probably read it today." Today. As if there wouldn't be a tomorrow after whatever was inside that envelope. I walked to the kitchen table, the same place where I had once signed permission slips for school trips, loan papers for medical bills, birthday cards I couldn't afford to fill with gifts. I sat down slowly, as if my bones knew something my mind refused to accept. The paper sliced a tiny cut on my finger when I tore it open. A drop of blood fell on the first page, right on the word property. I started reading. The words blurred at first. Legal phrases, numbers, dates. Then suddenly a sentence snapped into focus like someone had slapped me awake. Notification of transfer of ownership. My breath caught. Of residential property located at 183 Willow Lane. My house. This house. My kitchen. My rose bush. My husband's ashes. Pursuant to the sale agreement executed by authorized representative Daniel Sanders. I didn't understand the rest. My eyes stopped moving. The letters became meaningless shapes. All I could see, over and over, was my son's name printed on that paper, just below a line that basically said he had sold the only home I had ever known, without telling me. My ears started ringing. For a moment I thought I might be having another small stroke. The chair felt unstable under me, like the floor had tilted. My hand clutched the edge of the table and I could hear my own voice say, very softly, "No, no, no, no." The man in the doorway cleared his throat. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I wanted to scream at him, ask him how he could hand this to me like it was just mail, ask him if he had a mother, if he understood what it meant to lose the place where every version of yourself learned to breathe. But all that came out was a whisper. "He sold my house," I said. "My son sold my house." The man looked at me with that helpless pity strangers wear when they know they're part of someone's worst day and can't do anything about it. "There's a number on the back if you have questions," he said. "There's also a deadline. You'll want to read that carefully." A deadline. For my memories. For my husband's ashes. For the life I hadn't finished living yet. When he left, the silence in the house changed. It wasn't familiar anymore. It was hostile. As if the walls knew they belonged to someone else now and were just waiting for me to leave. I pressed the papers to my chest and walked to the window. The rosebush moved gently in the wind, thin branches brushing against the glass. Under that soil, my husband was supposed to rest. Safe. Untouched. Permanent. Suddenly, nothing felt permanent anymore. Not even death. If you've ever felt your whole life slipping away with just a few words on a page, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you love more than yourself, like this video. So I know I'm not the only one whose home was taken before they were ready to leave. The papers shook in my hands, but it wasn't just age, it was betrayal. Real, thick, metallic betrayal, sitting on my tongue like I had bit it too hard. I thought, for a second, that maybe there was a mistake. Maybe there was another Evelyn Sanders, another 183 Willow Lane, another son named Daniel. The mind does that, you know. It builds little lies in seconds, just to keep the heart from collapsing. I spread the documents across the table, flattening each page with my palm. The ink smelled faintly like plastic and something sour. The letters looked too clean for how dirty this felt. Transfer of ownership. Buyer. Closing date. Vacate. Words that meant nothing when I was young suddenly meant everything now. My eyes caught a line near the bottom, under all the printed cruelty. Executed by authorized representative, Daniel Sanders, holder of power of attorney dated. My breath hitched. There was a date. 6 months ago. 6 months. I tried to remember that day. I wasn't in a hospital bed. I hadn't just come out of surgery. No. I was at my own kitchen table. This table. Daniel had brought a neat stack of papers, smiled that tight smile he wears when he wants something. "Mom, these are just some documents for your insurance and for emergencies," he had said. "After your last dizzy spell, it's better if I can sign things for you when needed. You trust me, right? You trust me, right?" I remember my hand cramping as I signed. My eyes were tired, the letters too small. I remember asking, "Is this really necessary?" And him kissing my forehead like I was a child. "Of course it is, Mom. I'm just trying to take care of you." I had believed him. I had believed my own son. Now those signatures, my signature, stared back up at me and photocopied black and white, like evidence against me in a trial I didn't even know I was in. My full name, shaky, slightly crooked. I traced it with my finger, feeling the shame rise in my throat. How do you accuse your own child of stealing from you when you technically gave him the keys? The kettle started whistling again. I had forgotten I'd put water on. I stood up too fast, the room spinning for a moment. I gripped the back of the chair until the dizziness passed, then turned off the stove. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. I hadn't even put tea leaves in. Just water. Useless, boiling water. I went to the sink and splashed some on my face, then stared at myself in the little square mirror above the faucet. The woman looking back at me was older than I felt. Lines carved deep around her mouth, as if every silence had cut another mark. Hair too thin, eyes too tired. "Of course he sold it," I whispered to that woman. "You made this house his burden long before it was his inheritance." The thought came cruel and honest at the same time. Daniel never liked this place the way I did. To him, it was where the electricity got cut off twice when he was a kid, where he heard his father vomiting in the bathtub during chemo, where I left him in front of the TV to go work night shifts, promising I'd be back before he woke up, and sometimes failing. Maybe, to him, these walls don't hold memories. They hold debts. Still, nothing justifies this. No resentment justifies taking a pen and signing away the ground under your mother's feet. The knock on the door made me jump. My heart raced, thinking foolishly that it might be Daniel. That somehow he had felt something. A chill, a guilt, a mother's pain traveling through the air. I hurried to the door, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. It was Mrs. Green, my neighbor, holding a plastic container with still warm lasagna. She lives alone too, though she says she enjoys it. Her lipstick is always a little crooked, and her perfume arrives before she does. "Evelyn, dear, I made too much," she started, then stopped when she saw my face. "Oh, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I almost laughed. A ghost. Not yet, I thought. That would come later. "I'm fine," I lied. The word tasted like chalk. "Just a bit tired." She glanced past me and spotted the papers on the table. Her eyes narrowed. "Is everything okay? That looks like official stuff." I hesitated. I've always been stingy with my pain. I don't like to feed it to other people. But something inside of me cracked open then, like a dam that had been holding back too much for too long. "My son sold the house," I said. The sentence felt surreal as it left my mouth. "He sold it without telling me." Mrs. Green's lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Then, softly, "Oh, Evelyn." She stepped in without waiting for an invitation and closed the door behind her. The smell of tomato sauce followed her. She put the lasagna on the counter and went straight to the table, adjusting her glasses to read. "Transfer of ownership," she murmured. The same words that had cut me now sliced through her. "Power of attorney. Daniel. Good Lord." She looked up at me, her eyes wet. "Did you know? Did you agree to this?" "I agreed to him taking care of me," I said. "Not to this." My voice broke on the last word. She reached for my hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. "You have to call him," she said. "Right now. There must be some explanation. Maybe this is a mistake, or temporary, or—" "It says final," I interrupted. "It says the sale is already completed. There's a deadline to vacate." I had to force that word out. Mrs. Green went quiet. She looked around my kitchen the way you look around a hospital room when you know someone won't be leaving it the way they came in. "When?" she asked. 60 days, I whispered. I have 60 days to erase my life from this place. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. A bird screeched. The refrigerator hummed on, indifferent. Call him, she repeated, softer. Please, you can't carry this alone. So I did. My fingers trembled as I dialed Daniel's number. The screen glowed with his name and a small, smiling photo of him taken years ago, when his eyes were still soft around the edges. I pressed call and put it on speaker, my hands too unsteady to hold the phone to my ear. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Every ring felt like another rejection. Then, finally, his voice filled the room, smooth and rushed. Hey, Mom, can I call you back later? I'm in the middle of something. The anger came so fast it almost scared me. It pushed up through my chest, warm and electric, drowning the fear for a second. No, I said, more sharply than I intended. You cannot call me back later, Daniel. You can't sell my house and then put me on hold. There was a pause. A small, heavy silence. What? He said. The word was flat, careful. I received a notice, I continued, my voice shaking now. A legal notice. It says you sold the house, my house, without telling me, without asking me, using that paper you made me sign when I was sick and scared. On the other end, I heard him exhale. Not a shocked gasp, not confusion, a long, frustrated exhale. Mom, he said, and the way he stretched that word told me everything. I was going to talk to you. I just needed to get things in order first. This is what's best for you. Best for me. The room tilted again, but this time it wasn't a dizzy spell. It was rage. If you've ever had someone use those words, it's for your own good. While they quietly tear your life apart, tell me in the comments. Because I need to know I'm not the only one who has been protected like this. Best for me? I repeated, my voice thin and sharp at the same time. Explain to me how selling the only place I have to live is best for me, Daniel. Use small words, please. I'm suddenly very slow. On the other end, I heard him mutter something under his breath, the way he used to when I told him to turn off the TV as a teenager. Mom, don't do this, he said. Don't make it dramatic. You're not being kicked out onto the street. You'll be in a good care facility. Professional staff, medical support, people your own age. It's safer. You'll have everything you need. I have everything I need, I snapped. I have my home. Your home is old, he replied. It's falling apart. You can barely manage the stairs. The roof leaks every time it rains. The heater broke twice last winter. You could fall, hit your head, and nobody would even know. His words were like little darts of truth, and that made them hurt even more. Yes, the heater had broken. Yes, I avoided the stairs on bad days. Yes, I sometimes lay in bed at night wondering how long it would take for someone to find me if my heart decided it was finally done. But that was my fear to carry, not his excuse to sell my life. So this is about my safety? I asked quietly. Not about the money? Not about the amazing offer you got for this land? Not about that promotion you've been chasing at your job, the one that depends on closing big deals? He stayed silent just a little too long. Of course the money helps, he said finally. For both of us. Mom, listen to me. You can't live forever. We need to plan. This way, you'll be taken care of, and I can finally stop worrying every second about you falling or forgetting to turn off the stove. I've been carrying this alone for years. There it was. The confession dressed as complaint. I've been carrying this alone. I swallowed hard. You've been carrying this alone? I repeated. Daniel, I carried you alone. I worked double shifts while your father was sick, just so you could have notebooks for school and food on your plate. I walked home at 2 a.m. in the rain because we didn't have a car. I slept in chairs next to hospital beds for months. You think you invented worry? My voice was rising, but I didn't care. Mrs. Green squeezed my shoulder, standing behind me like a silent witness. This isn't about the past, Mom, he said. This is about now. You're not well. You had that episode. A dizzy spell, I cut in. Not a coma. I remember my name. I can still read. Apparently, I just can't read my own son. He sighed again, and I could picture him rubbing his forehead, impatient. You're making this harder than it has to be, he said. The papers are signed. The sale is done. The buyer is already preparing plans. You have 60 days. I've already reserved a room for you at Willow Creek Senior Living. It's a good place, Mom. Private room, garden, activities. I don't want activities, I shot back. I want my kitchen, my bed, my husband's ashes in the backyard. I want the sound of this floor creaking when I walk to the bathroom at night. I want continuity. The last word came out almost as a sob. Continuity doesn't keep you alive, he said. You're being sentimental and unrealistic. That's what old women are allowed to be, I said. You know what they're not supposed to be? Homeless. For the first time, his voice cracked, just a little. You won't be homeless, he insisted. You'll be in a facility that costs more a month than you ever spent on yourself. I'm trying to do right by you, even if you can't see it. And you needed to do that behind my back? I asked. You needed to trick me into signing a paper when I was scared and dizzy, instead of sitting down like a son and saying, Mom, I'm worried. Can we talk? He was quiet. I knew you'd say no, he said finally. Yes, I answered. I would have said no, because it's my no to give. There it was, our entire relationship distilled into a few sentences. Him deciding what I couldn't handle, me paying the price for choices I never got to make. Look, he said, trying to sound calm. What's done is done. Fighting won't change it. The buyer is coming next week to see the place in person. Be nice, okay? It reflects on me, too. I almost dropped the phone. The buyer is coming here? I asked. Yes, he replied. They wanted to see you, the previous owner. I thought that was considerate. I laughed then. A short, ugly laugh that didn't sound like it belonged to me. How thoughtful, I said. They steal my house, and then they come to admire the ruins. You're being unfair, he said, a hint of anger finally slipping through. This is not theft. It's legal. You signed the power of attorney. Legal and moral are not the same thing, I whispered. Mom, please, he said. Don't do anything crazy. Don't embarrass yourself. Or me. Just pack your things slowly. We'll move you in a few weeks. You'll see. You might even like it there. Like it there, I repeated, numb. You talk about my life like it's a hotel reservation. I have to go, he said abruptly. I'm at work. We'll talk more later, okay? No, I said softly. We won't talk later. We will talk now. Or maybe we won't talk at all. But he had already hung up. The screen went dark. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. Mrs. Green let out a shaky breath. I'm so sorry, Evelyn, she whispered. I looked around the kitchen as if expecting it to answer for him. The faded curtains, the chipped mug on the counter. The photograph of Daniel at 8 years old, missing his front teeth, framed near the stove. I walked over to it and ran my thumb over the glass. When he was little, I said, he used to say this house smelled like pancakes and soap. He told me he felt safe here. He used to sleep with his head on my lap on this very floor when thunderstorms scared him. Mrs. Green nodded, her eyes glistening. And now, I continued, he talks about it like it's a problem that needs solving. A number on a sheet, a box to be checked. I felt something shift inside me then. A small, cold clarity. They are coming here, I repeated. The buyers. I straightened my back, feeling the weight of my years and the stubbornness that had carried me through all of them. If they are going to walk through my life with their clean shoes and their plans, they are going to look me in the eye while they do it. Mrs. Green touched my arm. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said. But I know one thing. I may not be able to stop the sale, but I refuse to leave this house as a ghost. If you've ever had to stand your ground when the ground itself was being taken from under you, follow my story. Because the hardest part, the part where I meet the stranger who now owns everything I built, is still to come. The buyer arrived on a Thursday, the kind of gray afternoon that makes everything look a little faded, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. I had been awake since dawn, wandering from room to room, touching objects as if I were blessing them goodbye. My fingers moved over the back of the worn-out sofa, the chipped frame of the hallway mirror, the dent on the wall at the bottom of the stairs where Daniel crashed his toy car when he was 5. Every corner whispered, I was here. You were here? We were real. I set 2 cups on the kitchen table, out of habit. Then I put one back. They weren't coming here as guests. They were coming as owners. When the doorbell finally rang, the sound cut through the house like a command. I wiped my hands on my dress, took a breath that got stuck halfway, and walked to the door. My heart pounded so loudly I could feel it in my neck. Through the glass, I could see silhouettes. 2 people. One tall, broad-shouldered. Probably a realtor or some lawyer, I thought. The other, slightly shorter, standing very still. Something about that posture. Calm, but braced. As if they were preparing for impact. I opened the door. The man spoke first. Dark suit, professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mrs. Sanders? I'm Mark Lewis from the agency. This is Ms. Hart. He stepped aside so I could see her. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s. Dark hair pulled back in a low, neat bun. A simple white shirt, jeans, no flashy jewelry. She didn't look like money, not the way people who destroy neighborhoods usually do. She looked normal. Tired, in a way that felt familiar. There was a faint scar near her left eyebrow, a thin white line that cut through otherwise smooth skin. Her eyes met mine, and something strange rippled through my chest. It wasn't recognition, not exactly. More like déjà vu, like a dream I'd had once, years ago, and never remembered until that second. Mrs. Sanders, she said, her voice soft but clear. Thank you for letting us come. I almost laughed, letting them, as if I had a choice. My son did not leave me much room to say no to anything, I replied. But since you're already buying my life, you might as well see where you're moving it into. For a moment, her face flinched, just a fraction, as if my words landed somewhere tender. Then she nodded. I understand this is difficult, she said quietly. No, I answered. You don't. Not yet. Mark cleared his throat, shifting a folder in his hands. If we could take a quick walk through the property, he said businesslike. Just to finalize some details, measurements, renovation notes. Of course, I said. Come in. Try not to trip over any ghosts. They stepped inside. The house seemed to inhale with them, the floor creaking under unfamiliar weight. I watched their eyes move over the hallway, the faded family photos, the cheap side table, the cross hanging a little crooked near the door. Ms. Hart's gaze lingered on the cross longer than I expected. This way, I said, leading them into the living room. As we walked, I became acutely aware of every flaw. The uneven paint, the sagging bookshelf, the way the rug curls up at one corner. I imagined them seeing only problems to be fixed, surfaces to be replaced. It felt like someone judging your face under bright lights, noting every wrinkle. So, Mark began, flipping open his folder. As we discussed, the plan is to preserve the main structure but modernize the interior. Open up this wall, update the kitchen, rewire. I've kept this house standing through storms, leaks, and a husband dying slowly in the bedroom down the hall, I cut in. It may not be modern, But it's not broken. Mark blinked, startled. Ms. Hart's eyes shifted to me, studying my expression with a focus that made me feel like I was the one under inspection. I don't intend to break it, she said softly. I actually want to keep as much of it as possible. That surprised me. I looked at her more closely. Up close, I noticed other small details. The faint tremor in her left hand when she adjusted her sleeve. The way she kept looking at the floorboards as if they were telling her something. What exactly do you intend to do here? I asked. My son keeps saying renovation like it's a magic word that makes all of this okay. She took a breath, her eyes flicking briefly toward the window, where the rose bush nodded outside. I'll explain, she said. But can we see the rest first? I'd like to feel the house before I talk about it. Feel the house. Most people say inspect, check, measure, not feel. The word loosened something in me, just a little. Fine, I said. Follow me. We walked room to room. The living room, the little dining area where birthdays were celebrated with cheap cake and too many candles. The narrow hallway lined with pictures, Daniel with missing teeth, Daniel in a school play, Daniel holding a fishing rod with his father, awkward and proud. Mark took notes, muttering measurements, distances, technical words that slid off my skin. Ms. Hart said little. She moved slowly, fingertips grazing door frames, stopping sometimes to just stand in the middle of a room and close her eyes like she was trying to listen. When we reached the small room that used to be Dan's nursery and later turned into a storage room, she paused in the doorway. Was this a child's room once? She asked. Yes, I replied, surprised. How did you know? She looked at the walls, at the faint outline of stars I had painted decades ago, now almost completely faded. The way the light hits, she said. It feels like the kind of room where someone once waited for footsteps in the hallway at night. It was such a specific thing to say that for a moment, I forgot to be angry. You're observant, I muttered. Survival skill, she answered. We ended in the kitchen, my favorite place, the heart of everything. The table, scarred by years of elbows, homework, and unpaid bills, stood solid in the center. The kettle sat where it always did, like a small metal sentinel. Ms. Hart's eyes landed on a framed photograph tucked near the spice rack. It showed me in a nurse's uniform, younger, hair pulled back tightly, mascara smudged from a long shift. I was standing in front of an old hospital entrance, the sign above faded and cheap. You were a nurse, she said. It wasn't a question. Emergency room, I replied. For 32 years. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Must have seen a lot. More than enough, I said. People come in full of life and leave as paperwork. As soon as I said it, something shifted in her eyes. A flicker. Pain, maybe. Recognition. Yeah, she murmured. I know what that's like. Mark cleared his throat again, clearly eager to drag the mood back to square footage and permits. The backyard? He asked. I led them to the back door. As soon as I opened it, the familiar smell of damp earth and roses wrapped around us. The air was cooler, cleaner. The rosebush stood slightly to the left, its branches heavy, petals brushed with the pale softness of age. I walked straight to it without thinking. My hand found the trunk, fingers pressing into the rough bark. My husband is here, I said quietly. Under this soil. Mark shifted uncomfortably. I was informed there were ashes on the property, he said. Of course we can arrange for— They stay, I interrupted, turning to him with more force than I thought I had left. I don't care what you arrange. He doesn't move. I won't dig him up like some old regret just to make room for your plans. Mark opened his mouth, closed it again, then glanced at Ms. Hart, clearly looking for backup. She stepped forward, her eyes on the rosebush, not on him. He can stay, she said softly. If you're willing? I'd like this garden to remain exactly as it is. That startled me again. I studied her face. That scar near her eyebrow. The faint hollow under her cheekbones, like someone who had been hungry for a long time once and had never fully forgotten it. She knelt, slowly, and brushed the soil lightly with her fingertips, as if touching something sacred. "How did he die?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Cancer," I answered. "Slow, ugly. The kind that takes pieces of a person one by one until there's more absence than presence." She nodded, eyes still on the ground. "I understand slow deaths," she said. "They're cruel in their own way." We stood there for a moment, the three of us, in a silence that felt heavier than any words. Finally, she rose and turned to face me directly. Her gaze was steady now, determined. "Mrs. Sanders," she said, "I think I owe you an explanation about why I chose this house, why this place, out of all the places for sale in this city." "You probably saw a good investment," I replied, bitterness returning to coat my tongue. "Big lot, old structure, easy to flip." "No," she said. "I saw something else." She paused, searching my face like she was looking for permission. "I saw a file, a long time ago, in a different building, with your name on it." Her words made the air around me thicken. A file. My name. It didn't make sense. And yet, deep inside, something old and buried shifted uneasily. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She took a small folded paper from her bag. It was yellowed at the edges, creased from being opened and closed too many times. She held it carefully like it was fragile. "This is going to sound strange," she said, "but this isn't the first time we've met, Mrs. Sanders." My heart stuttered. If you've ever had someone look you in the eyes and tell you that your life crossed theirs in a way you can't remember, but they'll never forget, share this with someone who believes strangers can't be tied together by old wounds. For a second, I wondered if age had finally caught up with me, if my hearing was slipping into some cruel kind of hallucination. "This isn't the first time we've met." The sentence echoed inside my skull, rearranging old dust. "I think I would remember you," I said slowly. "I'm old, not empty." A corner of her mouth twitched, but her eyes stayed solemn. She unfolded the paper with careful fingers. I noticed then that the edges were thin, almost translucent from years of being handled. "This is a copy," she said. "The original is somewhere in a basement probably, but I held that one too once." She turned the paper toward me. My vision took a second to adjust. The heading was familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. The name of the hospital where I had spent most of my life. The old logo. The same formatting on 1,000 charts I'd filled in, signed, watched get filed away after someone's heart stopped. Underneath, in thick letters, was a name. Maya. NN. My throat closed. My fingers dug into my palms. "No," I whispered. That can't be." Her eyes didn't move from my face. "Do you remember her?" she asked quietly. "A girl, about 19, no ID, brought in late at night, drugs in her system, bruises on her arms. Someone wrote NN on her file. No name." I didn't just remember. I felt it. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of antiseptic over sweat and fear, the beeping monitors, the frantic rush when she crashed, the way her thin wrist felt under my hand. "I remember," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "But she died." The word tasted like the night it had happened. Heavy. Final. "For a while," the woman in front of me said. She died for a while. I stared at her, at the scar near her eyebrow, the hollows near her temples, the way she carried herself like someone who'd had to rebuild from rubble. No, I repeated, shaking my head. No, I signed the papers. My chest tightened. I paid for a grave. I chose a name because she didn't have one. I called her Maya. I watched them take her body. My knees went weak. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper now. You were not there when they realized the monitors were wrong, she said. When some overworked intern noticed a pulse where there was supposed to be none. They moved me, quickly. There was confusion, paperwork, fear of lawsuits. Someone changed the codes. On paper, the file stayed dead. On a lift between floors? I didn't. The backyard blurred around us, colors washing into each other. The rosebush, the fence, the cracked concrete patio. Everything tilted, like it had the day I got the legal notice. You're saying you're... I couldn't finish. I'm the girl you buried, she said. At least that's who I was the night you sat beside my bed and cried when everyone else had given up. I pressed a hand against my chest. I thought I failed you, I choked out. I thought, if I had pushed harder, screamed louder, gotten you tests faster. You were the only one who treated me like I was a person, she cut in gently. Do you know what my life looked like before that night? I was trash on sidewalks, a problem to be moved along, a statistic waiting to happen. You held my hand. You called me sweetheart when you thought I couldn't hear. You cleaned my face. You tucked my hair out of my eyes. Her eyes glistened. For the first time, her voice trembled. And when you thought I was gone, she continued, you made sure I wasn't thrown into a hole as nothing. You gave me a name. Maya. Do you know what it's like to wake up and learn that someone cared enough to bury a stranger properly? I shook my head, tears spilling over now. I didn't even try to wipe them away. They told me later, she said, about the paperwork, about the mistake, about the complication. They tried to make it sound like a joke. You're the girl who came back from the dead. She smiled without humor. I left that place as something else. They wrote a new name for me, new documents, new life. But I kept this. She tapped the paper with Maya, NN, on it. And I kept yours. I stared at my own name, printed in tiny letters near the bottom. Attending nurse, Evelyn S. I looked for you, she said. Years later. I went back to the hospital. They told me you had retired. Someone remembered your last name. I searched. It took time, but eventually I found a record. Property records. This address. 183 Willow Lane. That's why you bought this house, I whispered. Out of all the houses, you chose mine. I chose you, she replied simply. I didn't know if you'd even still be here, but when I found out your son was trying to sell, I saw an opening, a way to step back into the life of the woman who once stood between me and a nameless grave. I sank down onto the nearest chair. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. She didn't rush to comfort me, and somehow that felt like respect. She let me sit with the weight of it. All these years, I murmured, staring at my hands. I've carried you like a ghost. I thought you were my greatest failure, my unpunished crime. Every time I heard sirens at night, I thought of you. Every young girl on the street with hollow eyes. I saw you. I visited your grave once. I laughed softly, bitterly. A grave that was empty. She took a small breath. I visited that grave too, she said. When I finally tracked everything down, there was a cheap stone. No real name, no flowers, just the confirmation that someone had cared enough to mark the spot, that someone was you. The wind picked up, brushing against my cheeks like cold fingers. A car drove by in the distance, but the world felt strangely far away. I don't know what to say, I admitted. I don't know how to live in a world where the dead walk up to my back door and buy my house. She gave a tiny, sad smile. I didn't come to haunt you, she said. I came to return something. You gave me a place in this world when you thought I was already gone. Now, I'd like to give you one when your own son is trying to erase you from his. The words hit me harder than any legal document ever could. What do you mean? I asked slowly. She exhaled, looking back at the house, at the peeling paint, the uneven steps, the rosebush guarding the past. I'm not turning this into luxury condos, she said. I know that's what you think. I've seen enough of those. No. I'm turning this place into something else, a shelter, a home, for women like I was, lost, hurt, alone, the ones who come to the ER with nobody to hold their hand. She looked at me again, and there was a quiet fire in her eyes now. And I want you here, she said, not as a patient, not as a problem to be managed, as the heart of it. The woman who knows what it's like to watch people hover between life and death. The one who believes even a stranger deserves to be buried with dignity, or better yet, saved before it comes to that. I stared at her, words tangled in my throat, my mind trying to catch up with my heart. You're offering me a place? I asked. In my own house? That isn't mine anymore? I'm offering you a purpose, she answered. A way to stay. To turn all that guilt you've been dragging like a chain into something living, breathing, healing. Behind her, through the open door, I could see the edge of my kitchen table. The same table where I'd signed away my power. The same table where I'd read that I was being removed from the only home I'd ever built. Now, the girl I once buried, the girl who was never supposed to walk out of that hospital, was standing in front of me, hand outstretched, offering me a different kind of survival. If you've ever felt like your worst mistake might be the very thing that leads you to a new beginning, like this video, so I can feel your hand next to mine in this moment, when everything I thought was dead is suddenly knocking on my door again. When she said the word purpose, something inside me recoiled and reached for it at the same time. Purpose sounded heavy, like another responsibility, another chance to fail. But it also sounded like something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not since I hung up my nurse's badge and walked out of the hospital with my pockets empty and my hands suddenly useless. I think you overestimate me, I said, trying to hold on to some kind of distance. I'm not a saint. I'm tired. I forget where I put my glasses. Some days I can barely carry the groceries from the front door to the counter without needing to sit down. That doesn't disqualify you from mattering, she replied. Her certainty irritated me, maybe because it poked right where my doubt lived. What exactly would I do? I asked. In this shelter of yours. Sit in a rocking chair and talk about the good old days while broken girls pass me by. A shadow crossed her face. There were no good old days for me, she said quietly. Only bad ones that eventually got farther away. She stayed calm, but her jaw tightened. And no, I don't want you to be a prop. I want you to be a presence. Someone who listens when the doctor's shift ends. Someone who knows how to make soup that doesn't taste like charity. Someone who can look at a girl who thinks she's trash and say, with conviction, no, I saw worse than you, and you are still worth saving. The words hit a place I had boarded up years ago. The part of me that used to sit on the edge of metal beds, holding clammy hands, whispering stupid little stories about my son's school projects or my husband's bad jokes, just to keep the fear from swallowing people whole. I don't know if I have that in me anymore, I admitted. After Daniel, after this, I feel hollow. She nodded slowly. I know what it's like to feel hollow, she said. To think there's nothing left inside worth giving. But you're wrong about yourself, Mrs. Sanders. I felt your hands on my skin when I was half dead. I heard your voice through the fog. You told me I wasn't alone. Even when you thought I couldn't hear, you talked to me like I was still there. She paused, her eyes shining. No one had done that for me in a long time. Maybe ever. I looked down at my hands, the veins like blue rivers under thin skin. The same hands that had pushed carts, changed sheets, cleaned blood, signed forms. The same hands that had signed away this house because they trusted the wrong person. They shake now, I said quietly. Sometimes I drop things. She gave a small, soft laugh. So we'll buy heavier cups, she said. And if you drop them, we'll sweep it up together. Her ease with the image made my throat tighten. I was used to people treating my age like a problem to be managed, not a fact to be folded into the plan. From the doorway, I heard Mrs. Green clear her throat. I had almost forgotten she was still inside listening. She stepped onto the patio, wiping her hands on her skirt. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm just a nosy neighbor, but I've heard enough to say something." I turned, startled. "You don't have to—" "Oh, I know I don't have to," she interrupted. "But I'm going to." She looked at the younger woman. "You intend to bring troubled girls into this house? Into this neighborhood?" There was no accusation in her tone, just a hard-earned realism. "Yes," the woman said, "but not to cause trouble, to heal from it. I won't lie. Some will come with chaos, addiction, trauma, anger, but they'll also come with the possibility of not dying in an alley." Mrs. Green studied her for a long second. Then she sighed. "Well," she said, "if anyone in this street knows how to handle chaos, it's Evelyn. I've seen her drag a drunk neighbor's husband out of the cold, patch him up, and call his wife to come knock sense into him. I've seen her sit with my sister through chemo when I couldn't bear to. If you're building something here," she glanced at me, "maybe she's meant to be part of it. Or maybe I'm supposed to finally rest," I muttered, but my heart wasn't fully in the protest. "Rest where?" Mrs. Green asked gently. "In a room picked by a son who didn't think you deserved a say? Surrounded by strangers waiting for bingo night?" Her words hurt because they were true. I imagined Willow Creek Senior Living, beige walls, fresh sheets, nurses calling me sweetie without knowing a thing about the lives I'd held in my hands. A TV in the common room playing game shows too loud, a schedule printed on laminated paper, breakfast, activity, medication, lights out, a soft, safe burial while still breathing. I also imagined this house, changed, but still carrying its bones. Young women sitting at this table, shoulders tense, eyes darting, hands wrapped around mugs they didn't quite trust. Me standing by the stove, back aching, stirring a pot of cheap soup, listening to stories that sounded too much like the files I used to read. That sounded maybe a little like the girl I once called Maya. "I don't know how Daniel will take this," I said. It came out small. "If I stay here, in a way. If I refuse to go where he wants." The woman took a deep breath. "I can't fix what's broken between you and your son," she said. "And I won't pretend this erases what he's done. But here's what I can offer, clearly." She counted on her fingers, not dramatically, just to keep herself focused. "1," she said, "you will not be forced into that facility, not by me. This house is legally mine now, yes, but I will not use that to throw you out on the street. You can live here, in one of the rooms as long as you want, rent-free, as part of the staff, not as charity, as partnership." The word partnership felt foreign. I wasn't used to being anyone's equal anymore. "2," she continued, "your husband's ashes stay in this garden. I promise that. We'll build around them. Maybe a bench, a little plaque. This will always be his place." I glanced at the rosebush, as if checking that he approved. "N3," she said. "This won't be just any shelter. It will be small, personal, a place where names matter, where nobody is NN ever again." She unfolded the paper one more time and looked at it, then at me. "You once looked at a nameless girl and decided she deserved a name," she said. "I've lived a whole life from that decision. If you let me, I want to build a house where that's the rule, not the exception." The wind stilled. Even the distant traffic seemed to fade. It felt, for a moment, like time had taken a step back and was waiting for my answer. I thought of Daniel's voice earlier, telling me what was best for me, like I was a puzzle to be solved. I thought of my own voice, years ago, telling unconscious patients, "You're not alone," even when I knew some of them were. "Will there be rules?" I asked, surprising myself with how practical it sounded. "Of course," she said. "No drugs inside, no violence, curfews, chores, therapy. It won't be easy. For them, or for us." She gave a small smile. "You'd probably end up being as strict as any doctor." I huffed, something like a laugh scraping out of me. "I've been called worse than strict." She waited then. No pressure, no pleading, just space for me to decide. "I need time," I said finally, "to think, to grieve, to get used to the fact that I've been living with the wrong ghost." "You can have time," she replied. "We don't move anyone in tomorrow. Building permits and renovations take a while. Come inside." She gestured toward the kitchen. "Sit. Ask me anything, or sit in silence. I'm not going anywhere." We walked back into the house together. The air felt different now, heavier with possibility, lighter with something that might one day be called hope. I sat at the table where bad news had arrived, and now maybe a strange grace was pulling up a chair. If you've ever stood at a crossroads where one path is safe but suffocating and the other is terrifying but honest, tell me in the comments. Because I need to know which one you would choose if you were sitting at this kitchen table with me. We sat at the kitchen table like two people meeting for the first time, and at the same time picking up a conversation that had been interrupted years ago. The afternoon light stretched long across the wood, catching every scratch, every ring left by forgotten cups. This table had seen overdue bills, birthday cakes, lab results, and now, this. A dead girl who wasn't dead, and an old woman who wasn't done yet. "What did they call you?" I asked. "After that night? When you stopped being Maya NN on a file?" She hesitated, then smiled in a way that was almost shy. "Legally?" she said. "Emma Hart. It was the name on the first clean set of papers they gave me. New ID, new birthday. A nice counselor thought I needed a fresh start, so she picked something that sounded soft." Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. Took me years to wear it without feeling like I'd stolen it from someone better. "Emma," I repeated, tasting the word. It felt wrong, but not in a bad way. Wrong the way new shoes feel before they mold to your feet. "And Hart?" She shrugged. "Someone thought it was pretty. Hart with no E. I used to joke that they left the E out because I didn't deserve the full version." There was no humor in her eyes when she said it. "You deserved more than a full alphabet," I muttered. "You deserved people who didn't let you get to that hospital in the first place." She looked at me, and for a moment, the years between then and now collapsed. I didn't see a polished woman with neat hair and a firm plan. I saw a 19-year-old with bruises blooming on her arms, mascara streaked down her cheeks, staring at me from a stretcher with that particular mix of terror and resignation that says, "This is not the first time I've been hurt, and it probably won't be the last." "What happened after?" I asked. "After you walked out of there with your new name. She took a slow breath. It wasn't a movie, she said. No soft music, no miraculous healing. They put me in a halfway house for a while. I detoxed, threw up more than I thought was humanly possible, screamed at people who tried to help me, ran away twice. A corner of her mouth lifted. I kept this paper with your name on it hidden in my pillowcase. Sometimes the only thing that kept me from walking back onto the streets was knowing that somewhere out there was an old nurse who thought I was worth a gravestone. I swallowed hard. I never imagined, I whispered. I buried you to quiet my own guilt. I thought it was the last kindness I'd ever be allowed to do for you. Well, she said softly, it turned out to be the first. She told me more, in fragments. A job washing dishes. A roommate who stole her last $10. A social worker who didn't give up. Night classes. Panic attacks in crowded buses. The first time she signed her new name on a lease and didn't feel like she was lying. The first time someone touched her without taking something. As she spoke, I felt something unexpected crawl up inside me. Pride. As if I had something to do with the fact that she was sitting here, spine straight, eyes clear, talking about a future she had built plank by plank out of her own wreckage. And now you're buying houses, I said, half teasing, half astonished. Building what exactly? A chain of shelters? A little empire of lost girls? She shook her head. No empire, she said. Just a few places. Enough for me to feel like I'm tilting the scale, even if just a little. I got tired of seeing women disappear between the cracks of systems that use words like intake and discharge like they're talking about machines. That's what happens when people become files, I murmured. Exactly, she said. I was a file. Maya, NN, dead. Then accidentally not dead. I can't fix everything that happened to me. But I can build spaces where someone like me doesn't end up as a line in a report unless she chooses to. We fell quiet for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. A car honked far away. Mrs. Green pretended to read a magazine in the living room, but I could feel her ears tilted toward us. You know, I said slowly, this house, it was supposed to be Daniel's safety net. His inheritance. His proof that I left him something. Emma considered that. And yet he used it to push you out, she said. Sometimes the things we call safety nets are just ropes we hang each other with. I flinched at the accuracy. He's not a monster, I said reflexively, even as part of me wanted to call him worse. He's angry, tired. Maybe he's been carrying resentment longer than I realized. Resentment doesn't sign legal documents in secret, she said gently. That takes choice. I stared at the table. I keep thinking I raised him better than this, I whispered. Maybe you raised him to survive, she said, and he learned the wrong lessons about what surviving looks like. Her words lodged in my chest. I thought of all the times I'd said, we'll figure it out, through gritted teeth, hiding overdue bills. The way I'd praised him for being tough, for not crying, for understanding when I missed his school events because of double shifts. Maybe he'd learned that love meant swallowing your needs. Maybe he'd learned that money outruns pain. Have you told him about me? She asked suddenly. I blinked. Of course not, I said. How do you even start that conversation? By the way, son, remember all the nights I couldn't look at you properly? I was haunted by a girl I thought I killed. Maybe not in those words, she said, a faint smile touching her mouth. But maybe he needs to know who you are beyond the version of you in his head. The one who was always at work, always exhausted, always behind. I shrugged. He isn't interested in versions of me that aren't convenient. Are you sure? She asked. Or are you just afraid he won't be? Her question stung, not because it was cruel, but because it found the softest part of me and pressed. I don't know, I admitted. Every time I try to open something real with him, it turns into Numbers, plans, criticism. He talks to me like I'm a project he's mismanaging. "And how do you talk to him?" she asked. I thought of the way I'd thrown his own childhood back at him like an argument. I walked home in the rain. I worked nights. I sacrificed. Old sacrifices used as currency. "I talk like a ledger," I said quietly. "Debits and credits. What I gave, what he owes." Emma nodded slowly. "That's not a conversation," she said. "That's accounting." I let out a tired laugh. "Look at you," I murmured. "Coming into my home, resurrecting yourself and giving me free therapy." She smiled for real then, small but warm. "Considerate interest on a very old debt," she said. We sat there, the weight between us less hostile now, more like a shared blanket made of ugly truths. I traced a groove in the table with my finger, thinking of all the ways this could go wrong, all the ways staying here could blow up in my face, all the ways leaving could kill me while I was still breathing. "What if I say yes?" I asked finally. "To staying, to whatever you're building. What does that look like day to day? Paint me a picture, Emma. I need something more than pretty words." She didn't hesitate. "It looks like early mornings," she said. "You complaining about the cold while putting on the kettle. A girl coming into the kitchen with eyes swollen from crying, pretending she just couldn't sleep. You handing her a mug, not asking questions until she's ready," she went on. "It looks like you teaching someone how to change a bedsheet properly, not like in the motels she used to clean. It's you sitting at this table with a woman who hasn't eaten in 3 days because food felt like something she didn't deserve, convincing her that soup doesn't have to be earned." My eyes prickled. "It's bad days," she continued. "A relapse. A broken rule. Police at the door sometimes. You standing there shaking but not stepping aside when someone tries to drag a girl out like she's a problem instead of a person." She took a breath. "And it's good days," she said. "One of them getting a job interview and asking you to help choose a blouse that doesn't scream survival mode. Another one cooking something from her childhood and dragging you to the stove like an excited kid. Holidays where no one knows the right way to celebrate, so you all make one up." I could see it then, faintly. A house that wasn't just mine, but still carried my fingerprints on everything. A life where my usefulness wasn't measured in how little space I took up in my son's schedule. "And at night?" I asked. "At night," she said. "When everyone's asleep and the house is finally quiet, you sit by that window, look at that rose bush, and talk to your husband about the chaos you survived that day. And maybe—" She hesitated, then met my eyes. "Maybe sometimes you look up and you talk to the girl you once called Maya, and you tell her what you're doing with the second chance she gifted you without even knowing." My throat closed. I swallowed around the lump. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," I whispered. She shook her head. "You're not," she said. "Not alone. Neither am I. That's the point." The kettle began to whistle softly behind us, forgotten on the stove. I stood up, turned off the burner, and poured water into 2 cups. My hands trembled, but I didn't spill. I set a cup in front of her. "Tea," I said. She smiled. "I'd like that." As the steam rose between us, I realized something small but terrifying. In this moment, I wanted this more than I wanted to run. And wanting anything, at my age, after this kind of betrayal, felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and leaning forward. If you've ever felt torn between protecting yourself and risking what's left of your heart to build something that might outlive you, follow this story. Because the next part is where I finally decide whether I'll let my son write my ending or write a new one with my own shaking hands. I didn't decide that day. I wish I could tell you I slammed my fist on the table, shouted yes, and everything aligned like a scene written for applause. But life isn't a neatly edited video. It's pauses. It's dishes to wash, pills to take, aches that remind you you're still here. It's fear that doesn't disappear just because hope knocked on your door. That night, after Emma left with Mark and his folders and his careful nods, the house felt swollen, too full, like all the air had changed. I walked through each room in the half-dark, turning lights off one by one. My fingers brushed the walls as I went, the way you might trail your hand along the back of a sleeping animal you don't want to wake. In the bathroom mirror, my face looked different. Not younger, not happier, just more visible to me, like I was finally looking without flinching away. I slept badly. Dreams came in pieces. The hospital corridor, endless and fluorescent. A sheet pulled over a young girl's face. The same girl sitting at my kitchen table, alive, her eyes searching mine. Daniel, small, holding my hand. Daniel, grown, signing papers with my name on them as if it were nothing but ink. At some point, I woke up with my heart racing and my pillow damp. The digital clock on my bedside table glowed 3:17 a.m. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat there a moment, letting the dizziness pass. Old age is cruel like that. Every movement is a negotiation. I went to the kitchen. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the small lamp by the stove. The faint pool of yellow made the room feel like a confession booth. I poured myself some water and stood by the window. The garden was just a darker shape against the night. The rosebush was a shadow, barely outlined. Somewhere under that darkness, my husband's ashes lay in the soil, mixed with roots and worms and the small, ordinary life of the earth. "I don't know what to do," I whispered to the glass. "You always made the big decisions feel smaller. I don't have that now. I only have this huge thing in my shaking hands." Silence answered. But sometimes silence isn't empty. It presses on you, forces you to listen deeper. "Do I follow our son," I continued, "into a place where everything is clean and planned and safe, but not mine? Or do I stay here in the mess, with a stranger who remembers my hands better than he does?" The truth rose up, uninvited. Daniel hadn't come by. He hadn't called back. Hours had turned into a day, then 2. His last words hung between us, unfinished, like a door he'd walked through and left open for cold air to creep in. On the 3rd day, my phone finally rang. His name lit up the screen. For a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. But avoiding him wouldn't change what he'd done. I'd spent too many years avoiding the hardest conversations. "Look where that got me," I answered. "Hello?" "Mom," he said. His voice was tired, frayed. "Can we talk? Properly this time." "That depends," I replied. "Are you calling as my son or as my unauthorized real estate agent?" He sighed. "Please don't start like that." "How would you like me to start, Daniel?" I asked quietly. "With thank you?" There was a pause. I could almost hear him swallowing his pride on the other end. "I know you're angry," he said. "You have every right. I should have talked to you before signing anything. I was scared." "Scared of what?" I asked. "Of me saying no? Of having to look me in the eye while you rearranged my life?" "Scared of losing you," he said, unexpectedly raw. "You keep pretending you're fine, but you're not. You had that spell. You forget things. You live alone in a house that's falling apart. I get calls from Mrs. Green every time you stumble on the steps. I'm an hour away, Mom. What if something happens and I'm not there?" His fear, naked like that, twisted something in me. Part of me wanted to comfort him, like when he was little and thought monsters lived in his closet. But there are monsters you don't soothe away. You have to name them. "You were scared of losing me," I repeated. "So you decided to lose me on your own terms." "That's not fair," he shot back, but his voice cracked at the edges. "Isn't it?" I asked. You moved me like a piece on a board without asking if I wanted to play. That's not protection, Daniel. That's control. He was quiet for a moment. I didn't know how to talk to you, he admitted. Every time I try to bring up the future, you wave your hand and say, I'll die when God decides, not when a brochure does. You shut down. You make jokes. You change the subject. And instead of trying harder, you chose the path with less conflict, I said. You let a lawyer have the conversation you didn't want to have yourself. His breath hitched. You think I'm not guilty? He said. I haven't slept properly since the sale closed. Every time I look at my reflection, I hear your voice from when I was a kid saying, We don't steal, Daniel. We don't lie. So why did you? I whispered. There it was. The question at the center of all of this. He didn't answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. Because I felt like I never had anything, he said. Not really. Not security. Not stability. Not time with you. This house. It was the one thing I knew would someday be mine, and I was so tired of waiting for someday while watching you slip. I told myself I was taking control. For both of us. But the truth is, he exhaled sharply. The truth is, I wanted the money. I wanted the promotion. I wanted to feel like I hadn't wasted my life being poor and scared. Hearing him say it out loud hurt, but it also cut through the fog of resentment. This wasn't just cruelty. It was desperation warped into selfishness. Do you regret it? I asked. Honestly. Not because I'm crying. Not because I'm disappointed. On your own terms, do you regret what you did? Yes, he said immediately. And no. The honesty stung. I regret how I did it, he continued. I regret signing without you. I regret making you feel disposable. But I don't regret trying to get you somewhere safer. I don't regret wanting a different life. Silence sat between us like a third person. There's something you don't know, I said finally. About the buyer. About this house. He groaned softly. Mom, please. Don't tell me they're worse than we thought. I already feel like a villain. They're not worse, I said. They're more complicated. She is more complicated. I told him in pieces about Emma, about the file, about Maya NN, about the grave I paid for and the girl who never stayed in it, about the paper with my name that she'd carried for years like a talisman. He didn't interrupt. For once, he listened. So you're telling me, he said slowly when I finished, that the woman who bought our house is someone you almost buried? Yes, I said. Someone I mourned. Someone I blamed myself for all these years. And someone who has now walked back into my kitchen and offered me a life you were planning to move me away from. It sounds insane, he admitted. So does selling your mother's house without telling her, I replied. He exhaled, a shaky laugh. Fair point. Then quietly, what do you want to do? There it was. The question he should have asked from the beginning. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said. Not yet. Maybe not soon. That's the truth. What you did, it cracked something important. But I know this. I don't want to spend whatever time I have left in a place chosen out of your fear and my obedience. And this project? He asked. This shelter? I pictured Emma in my kitchen, her hands around a steaming mug. I pictured unknown faces, tired and wary, walking through my front door with everything they own in one bag. I pictured myself, old and slower but still standing, saying, You're here. That matters. It scares me, I admitted. It will be messy, loud, hard. Some days I will hate it, and some days I might want nothing more than the quiet of that facility brochure on your desk. So, why consider it? He asked. Because, I said slowly, for the first time since I retired, I feel pulled toward something instead of just away from things. Because what I did for that girl, what I tried to do, what I thought I failed at, has grown into something I never imagined. And I can't ignore that. Not when it knocks on my door. On the other end, I heard him sniff. "So, you're choosing them over me," he said. Again. That cut deep. "This is not about choosing them over you," I said firmly. "It's about choosing me for once. Choosing a life I can live with, instead of a room I can die in quietly so you feel less guilty." He was quiet. "I don't know how to be your son in this version," he said eventually. "The version where I'm not the hero of my own story." "Then maybe it's time you learn," I answered gently. "I wasn't the hero in all of mine either." The line crackled. For a moment, I thought we might lose the connection. Maybe that would have been easier. But easy is what brought us here. "I'll come by," he said finally. "This weekend, we can talk in person. Maybe meet her." A flutter of anxiety ran through me. The idea of Daniel and Emma in the same room felt like introducing past and present at a dinner table and hoping they didn't tear each other apart. "All right," I said. "Come, no papers, no brochures, just you, and your mother, and the girl we both owe more than we understand." After we hung up, I sat very still. The phone lay on the table, its dark screen reflecting the ceiling light. I realized then that no matter what happened next, whether Daniel apologized properly or doubled down, whether Emma's project succeeded or collapsed under its own weight, the decision I had to make wasn't about them. It was about whether I was willing to live the rest of my life as someone things happened to, or as someone who still, even in her late 60s, could decide what to do with the pain she carried. If you've ever had to look at someone you love and say, "I choose myself this time," even when it broke your own heart a little, like this video, not for the algorithm, but so that wherever you are, I can feel that tiny act of courage echoing next to mine. Daniel arrived on Saturday afternoon, the sun too bright for the kind of conversation we were about to have. I watched from the window as his car pulled up to the curb, sleek and polished, a small monument to how far he'd clawed his way from the childhood we both survived. He sat there for a minute with the engine off, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead like a man about to walk into a courtroom. I almost went to the door to meet him, the way I used to when he was a boy coming home from school with a crumpled backpack and scraped knees. Instead, I stayed where I was. Let him ring the bell. When he finally did, the sound cut through the house, sharp and familiar. I opened the door. For a second, we just looked at each other. He had more gray at his temples than last time, fine lines around his eyes. He looked older, and so did I. We were both aging on opposite sides of the same wound. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I answered. We stood there in the doorway like strangers deciding whether to step into each other's weather. "You gonna let me in?" he asked, forcing a half smile. "For now," I said, stepping aside. He walked in, his eyes automatically scanning the hallway, the living room, like he was checking what he'd already sold. His gaze landed on the stack of papers still on the sideboard, the notice, the copies, the evidence. His jaw tightened. "You kept them out?" he asked. "I didn't know where to bury them," I replied. He winced slightly, then followed me into the kitchen. The table waited for us like an old referee. Emma was already there, sitting straight but not stiff, a mug between her hands. I'd invited her earlier, told her, "If this is going to work, he needs to see you as more than a line in a contract." She'd nodded, nerves flickering in her eyes but resolve holding her in place. When Daniel saw her, he stopped. "This is her?" he asked me, though he was looking at Emma. The girl from the hospital. Woman, she corrected gently. But yes, I suppose I was a girl when your mother knew me. Emma. She extended her hand. He stared at it, then shook it, slower than necessary. Daniel, he said, though I think you already know that. I saw your name on the paperwork, she replied. But names look different on people than they do on paper. He sat down, leaving a chair between them. I took the fourth seat, the square complete now. For a moment, none of us spoke. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say here, Daniel admitted. This whole thing feels unreal. Unreal is finding out the woman who buried you is still alive and making tea, Emma said. You'll catch up. He almost smiled despite himself. I took a breath. We're not here to punish you, I said to Daniel. At least, I'm trying not to be. We're here because this house is no longer just a piece of property you traded for future comfort. It's become something else. And before I decide anything, you need to see what that is. He frowned. Decide what? Whether I leave, I said, or stay. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at Emma. And you? He asked. What do you get out of her staying? Free live-in staff? A built-in mascot? Look at the saintly old nurse who forgave me for being trash? Emma's expression didn't harden, but it grew very still. I get to keep the woman who named me, she said. And I get someone who understands what this house is going to hold. It's not a marketing move, Daniel. It's alignment. Alignment, he repeated, skeptical. You talk like a therapist and a contractor had a child. I talk like someone who scraped herself back together from the life your mother tried to keep me from falling out of completely, she replied. He looked down at the table, fingers drumming lightly. I'm not a villain in this story, he said. At least not entirely. I'm just tired of feeling like the bad guy in my own life. This isn't about making you a villain, I said. It's about acknowledging that you did something that hurt me deeply, and that I still get to choose what I do next. You don't get to frame my survival as your redemption. He flinched. The truth can be a cruel kind of antiseptic. So, what is this place going to be? He asked Emma, shoulders tense. My mom said shelter, but I want specifics. I work in development. I know how these things go. Investors, permits, promises that crumble. She nodded. Fair enough, she said. Here's the plan. We keep the main structure, 6 bedrooms. We convert the den into a counseling room. We add security measures that don't feel like a prison. We partner with a local clinic and legal aid. We take in a small number of women at a time. No revolving door. Long-term, trauma-informed care, skills training. We don't just patch them up and send them back to the same war. And my mother? He asked. Where does she fit in your blueprint? Emma didn't answer for a moment. When she did, her voice was softer. She fits where she chooses to, she said. But my hope is that she'll be the one constant in a house full of people coming and going. The one who knows where the extra blankets are, who remembers which girl takes her tea suite and which one can't sleep without the hallway light on. He looked at me. That sounds like work, he said. Hard work. You're not young, Mom. I noticed, I said dryly. You should be resting, he continued. Traveling. Doing whatever old people do on those cruises with buffets and bad dancing. Not playing nurse again to a house full of trauma. For a second, anger sparked. You think sitting quietly in a facility, waiting for scheduled visiting hours is rest? I asked. That's not rest, Daniel. That's storage. His face twisted. I just want you to be safe. Safe from what? I pushed. From stairs? From burned soup? Or from feeling needed again? He fell silent. Emma spoke, careful. There's a difference between safety and stagnation, she said. You want her safe. So do I. But safety without dignity is just a well-lit cage. He looked between us, hurt and frustration warring in his eyes. "So what?" he asked. "I'm just the greedy son who sold his mother's house and now has to watch her choose strangers over him?" "I'm not choosing strangers over you," I said. "I'm choosing a life where what I've been through means something, where my mistakes and my guilt and my long nights at the hospital don't end in a hallway decorated with motivational posters and scheduled bingo." He stared at his hands. "When Dad died," he said quietly, "you disappeared into that hospital. I know you had to work. I know we needed the money. But you chose other people's emergencies over my everyday for years. I learned early that if I wanted to feel safe, I'd have to build that myself. That was my house, in my head, my future. And now it's—" He gestured around. "This." His honesty punched a hole in my chest. "I did choose work," I admitted. "I chose it because rent doesn't care if you're grieving. Because cancer treatments aren't free. Because every time I looked at you sleeping on the couch, I thought, if I don't go back, he doesn't eat. But you're right. You paid for that in loneliness. And I never really paid you back in time, just in guilt." He blinked hard, looking suddenly younger and lost. "I think selling this house was my way of collecting," he said, "taking back what I thought I was owed. It was wrong. I see that. But if you stay here, if you choose this, it feels like you're choosing them again." I reached across the table, my hand hovering over his like a question. He didn't pull away. "You're my son," I said. "No shelter, no project, no resurrected girl changes that. But I'm done paying old debts with my own disappearance. If I go to that facility just to make you feel better, I vanish in a way that looks polite. If I stay, if I help build this, I might finally be someone I can live with." His shoulders sagged. "What if you fall?" he asked, voice breaking. "What if one of these women hurts you? What if this all collapses and you're left with nothing?" "Then I will have fallen doing something that matters to me," I said. "Not sitting quietly in a room waiting for the end. And you will still be my son. You'll still be welcome in this house if you can live with what it becomes." He laughed bitterly. "A house full of broken women and my stubborn mother," he said. "Yeah, that sounds intense." "Broken people build every good thing you enjoy," Emma said softly. "Our cracks aren't a liability. They're the map." Silence settled again. Finally, Daniel nodded, slowly, like a man signing a contract no one could draft for him. "All right," he said. "If this is what you want, I won't fight you. I won't drag you anywhere. I'll cancel the reservation at Willow Creek." He swallowed. "I'll probably be angry about this for a while, and scared, and jealous maybe. But I won't uproot you again." Relief flooded me so suddenly my eyes blurred. "I don't need you to be happy about it immediately," I said. "I just need you to respect that for once. I am not letting fear or your guilt drive the car." He nodded again, then looked at Emma. "Take care of her," he said, the words rough. "She won't admit when she's tired. She'll push herself until she breaks." "I know," she replied. "She did that with me. It almost killed us both." They shared a look then, strange, wary, but honest. Two people whose lives had been shaped by my choices and my failures, sitting at my table, forced to see each other as more than obstacles. I squeezed his hand. "There's something you need to understand, Daniel," I said. "This house will never again be just yours in your imagination, or mine in my stubbornness. It's going to belong to stories bigger than us. That might hurt, but it might also heal things we can't fix any other way." "What if I don't fit into that story?" he asked. "Then we write a new chapter for you," I said. "Outside this house if we must. But I hope you'll keep coming back. Not for the real estate. For me." He let out a long breath. "I can try," he said. "No promises, just try. Somehow, that felt like more than I'd had in years. After he left, the house didn't feel empty. Not the way I feared it would. It felt in motion, like a deep breath held in the chest of something alive, waiting to be released. Emma stayed by the table watching me. "So?" she asked quietly. "Have you decided?" I looked around, at the worn cabinets, the tired floor, the rosebush outside holding my husband in its roots, the ghost of the girl I thought I buried sitting right in front of me with a second chance in her hands. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I'm staying, not as a guest, as part of this." Her eyes shone. "Then we'll start where all real things start," she said. "Messy and small. If you've ever stood up for your own life, even when it meant disappointing someone you love, share this with a friend who needs permission to choose themselves too, because sometimes we need to see an old woman do it to believe we're allowed to as well." Sometimes the past walks right back through your front door. The house didn't change overnight. At first, it was little things. Measurements on the walls in faint pencil marks, swatches of paint taped beside door frames, the distant thud of a hammer as a contractor tested the strength of a beam that had held our lives for decades. But beneath the dust and the noise, something quieter was happening. The house was learning a new language, and so was I. My days found a different rhythm. Instead of counting pills and waiting for phone calls that never came, I woke up to the sound of people working. The first morning I made coffee for myself and for the two workers tearing out the rotten porch steps. They looked at me like I was lost. "Ma'am, you don't have to—" "I'm not doing it because I have to," I cut in. "I'm doing it because no good work happens in this house without bad coffee at 8 a.m. That's the rule." They laughed, and just like that, the ground between us settled. Emma came every day, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, clipboard under her arm. She wasn't the kind of boss who barked orders from a distance. She climbed ladders, carried boxes, knelt on dusty floors to tape out where walls would move. Watching her work, I saw flashes of the girl she had been. Stubborn, raw, unbreakable in the places life had already snapped. We argued sometimes, about trivial things that meant more than we said. "You can't just rip out that cabinet," I protested one afternoon as a worker pried at the old wood. "I've stood in front of it crying, laughing, burning dinner. You can still smell my husband's cologne in that corner when it rains." Emma came closer, resting her hand lightly on the cabinet door. "The wood is rotten underneath," she said gently. "If we leave it, the whole thing will eventually collapse. We'll build a new one that still fits here. But we can't pretend this is solid just because we're afraid to see what's behind it." She wasn't just talking about the cabinet. I knew that. I let them take it out. I cried a little in the pantry where no one could see, then came back and helped sweep the dust. The first girl arrived before the paint was dry. Her name was Lena, 19, too thin, a bruise blooming on her cheek like an accusation. She stood on the front step with a social worker, arms crossed over her chest, jaw locked like she'd bite anyone who came too close. "This is temporary," she snapped, before anyone even spoke. "I'm not staying long. I just need a place until I figure things out." I recognized that tone. I'd heard it countless times in the ER. The voice of someone who had lost control of everything and was clinging to the last illusion that they were choosing this, not being pushed. "Good," I replied. "I don't like long-term guests. Come on in." She blinked, thrown off, then followed us inside. Emma showed her the room, fresh paint, clean sheets, a small dresser that still smelled like new wood. I watched from the doorway as Lena dropped her bag on the floor and stood there, suspicious of the softness. "There's a lock on the door," Emma said, pointing. "From the inside. No one comes in without you letting them." Lena's throat moved. "What's the catch?" she asked. "No catch," Emma said. "House rules are on the table downstairs. No drugs inside, no hurting yourself or anyone else. Curfew at 10 unless we agree otherwise. And you clean your own mess. That's it. You don't owe us a tragic story on day one." Lena's eyes flicked to me. "And you?" she asked. "What's your deal?" I shrugged. "I'm the old woman who yells if you leave dishes in the sink overnight," I said. "And the one who knows how to make soup when you're pretending you're not hungry." She rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth twitched. That night, I found her in the kitchen at almost midnight, opening and closing cabinets quietly like she was afraid of waking the house itself. She jumped when she saw me. "I was just looking," she said defensively. "I'm not stealing anything." "If you were stealing," I said, "you'd be faster and louder." I nodded toward the table. "Sit." She hesitated, then sank into a chair. I put a pot on the stove, my hands moving on autopilot. Oil, onion, garlic. The holy trinity of poor kitchens that still try. "I'm not hungry," she muttered. "Good," I said. "More for me." The smell filled the room slowly, wrapping around us. Her eyes betrayed her before her mouth did. "You like chicken noodle?" I asked. "Or are you one of those modern kids who are offended by gluten?" She snorted. "I like whatever's not from a can." I made 2 bowls. We ate in silence for a while, the clink of spoons loud in the quiet. "You live here too?" she asked eventually. "Yes," I said. "Why?" She frowned. "Couldn't you be in some fancy old people place with elevators and nurses and bingo?" "I had a reservation," I said. "I canceled." She stared at me like I'd said I turned down a winning lottery ticket. "Why?" "Because I've spent a lifetime watching people die in places that look clean on the outside and hollow on the inside," I replied. "I don't want my last years to feel like a waiting room." She looked at her soup, then at me. "So you chose this?" she asked, disbelief and curiosity tangled together. "Yes," I said. "I chose this." Her eyes softened just a fraction. "That's kinda stupid," she said, "but also kinda badass." I laughed. It surprised us both. Days turned into weeks. More girls came. Not many. The house couldn't hold many, and that was the point. Each arrival was a small storm. Each departure, when they were ready, was a quiet miracle. There were bad days, a relapse hidden in the bathroom, a shouting match that rattled the windows. One night, police lights flared outside because an ex wouldn't accept that the front door was a line he couldn't cross. My hands shook so badly that I dropped a glass, and it shattered across the kitchen floor. Emma took the broom from me that night. "I've got this," she said. "Sit down, Evelyn." "I'm not fragile," I snapped. "I didn't say you were," she answered. "I said you're tired. There's a difference." I sat. That was new for me, letting someone else wield the broom. There were good days, too. Laughter so loud it startled me out of my own thoughts. Lena showing me her first paycheck, her hands shaking, her eyes suspiciously wet. Another girl, Carla, teaching us all how to make a dish from her childhood, filling the house with smells that had never lived here before. Emma catching my eye in the doorway and giving a small nod that said, "We're doing it. It's working, even if just for today." Sometimes late at night when the house finally exhaled, I'd sit by the window and look at the rose bush. "It's different now," I'd whisper to the soil. "Not quieter, but better." I talked to my husband about the girls, about their anger, their jokes, their small victories. I talked to the ghost of the girl I'd once mourned and now made coffee with. "You see this, Maya?" I'd say, using the name that had once been all she had. "You see what grew out of those terrible nights? You see what your survival forced me to face?" Emma heard me once. I didn't realize she was in the hallway until she spoke. "I hear you when you talk to me like that," she said softly. "You know." I smiled without turning. "Good," I replied. "Someone should." "And Daniel? He didn't become a saint. There were weeks he didn't come. Times he'd call and his voice would be tight, judgment simmering under every question. 'Is it safe?' he'd ask. 'Are you okay? Are they using you?' Sometimes I wanted to snap, 'You used me first.' Instead I'd say, 'Yes, no, maybe. Come see for yourself.' He did, eventually. He'd show up with flowers from a gas station, awkward and defensive. He'd sit at the table while Lena pretended not to judge his expensive watch. Once, he arrived just as a girl named Tasha was leaving for a job interview, nerves buzzing off her like electricity. He held the door open for her. "Good luck," he said. She swallowed. "Thanks," she replied. "Your mom picked my shoes. She said hers are too full of history to loan out." He laughed. A real laugh. That sounds like her. Little by little, he saw me. Not as the helpless old woman in need of placement, not as the martyr he resented, but as a person who had chosen a hard thing on purpose. I saw him too, not as the greedy son from my nightmares, but as a frightened boy who had grown into a man making ugly choices out of fear. We never wrapped our story in a neat bow. Some wounds don't scar clean. But he came, and he stayed long enough to drink bad coffee and listen to women he'd once have called problems talk about the first time they felt safe. Sometimes he'd linger in the doorway, eyes distant, like he was rearranging the furniture inside his own head. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, he stood with me in the kitchen. "I still don't fully understand why you chose this," he said, gesturing around. "All this noise, all this risk." I stirred the pot on the stove. Lentil soup, cheap, filling, forgiving if you messed it up. "Do you remember when you were little?" I said, "and you asked me why I worked at the hospital instead of somewhere easier? I told you, because I don't want people to die alone." He nodded slowly. "I can't stop death," I said. "I've learned that. But I can keep people from walking through their worst moments without a hand to hold. That's what this house is now. A place where nobody gets erased quietly." "And you?" he asked. "Do you feel less erased?" I looked at him, at the boy I'd raised and the man I was still learning. "Yes," I said simply. "For the first time in a long time, yes." He swallowed, eyes shining. "Then maybe," he said, "maybe I did one thing right, even if I did it all wrong first." I smiled. "Don't get ahead of yourself," I replied. "You've got years of making up to do." He laughed, wiped his eyes roughly, and let me hug him like I hadn't in years. His shoulders didn't resist this time. "If you're waiting for a clean ending, there isn't one. Houses get old. People relapse. Good intentions sometimes fold under the weight of the world. I still wake up some nights convinced I've failed everyone. I still forget where I put my glasses and overcook the rice. But here's what I know now. My son sold my house without telling me. It broke something in me I thought was permanent. And yet, the person who walked through the door as the buyer was someone I had once buried in my heart and in my guilt. She came back not to punish me, but to pull me into a life I wouldn't have chosen alone. I thought the story was about losing my home. It turned out to be about finding myself in it again, surrounded by women who were told they were nothing and who now laugh loud enough to shake the dust from the ceiling. If any part of this story touched something raw in you, if you've ever felt betrayed or guilty or too old to start over, share it with someone who might need to hear that it is never too late to choose a different ending. Not a perfect one, not a pretty one, just one where you are no longer a silent guest in your own life.